Home is a physical space, but it's also an emotional, mental space.
Your sense of home is where you feel at peace.
Some of my friends' houses, they treat me like I'm their brother or sister or children because I've been there a long time. I've experienced good and bad with them, and it feels like home.
My name is Denis Grignon, and this program is called Home, an exploration of what home means to different people, and a personal journey of sorts to help define and find my home. Whether it's an actual building with four walls or a spiritual state of mind, home is different for everybody. Imagine, for instance, leaving your birth country on the other side of the world as a young adult and, say, eventually setting up a small donair and pizza restaurant and home in Nova Scotia.
Malik Badur, say Malik.
Where's home, Malik?
Original where I come from? My original home come from Syria. I've been in Dartmouth 25 years.
Was there ever a time when you were living here when you thought, I got to get home to my home in Syria? Was there something that was...
Not because I don't want to leave, not because I don't like here. I like to get back there because I miss sometimes there too. Visit there, live a couple of months up there, come back here. So, I mean, another home too for me, right? Yeah. I look at it, I get two homes, not just one home, right?
You have two homes?
Yes, yeah.
Did you ever come to that realization when you realized you had two homes, or did it just sort of happen?
Just like you're feeling about it, yeah. The way you feel about that. The house where you are inside the house, it don't make you feel you are somewhere. It make you, I know we are in Canada and Nova Scotia, but I mean it's a home. It could be that house, this is my family, sometime in Syria. I gonna talk to them same thing, I'm talking here or in Syria. But the feeling where you're at and the people around you, that's what make you feel if you are home or not. It's a home where you make your life. Sometimes from the person itself, how he communicate with people, how isolated he is. Because he could be, I mean, you live here in a community, you don't have a hard time to communicate with you or with anybody here or somebody walking in. Just the way your hospitality, you know what I mean? Because there is a lot of nice people here, you know what I mean?
Sounds simple, but Malik really just found his home by refusing to be negative about leaving Syria, by being positive about establishing a new life in Nova Scotia. You're listening to CBC Radio One and Sirius XM 169. This program is called Home.
Next message.
I'm Ward Anderson. Although I grew up in America, in the South, I've never felt quite in place there. I've always felt a little out of sorts. Even as a kid, I wanted to find a home somewhere where I felt just completely at ease, and I felt completely myself. And so after traveling for many, many years, and after living in many, many different cities, I finally have to say that I can call Toronto my home. And along the line, when I fell in love with my wife, I also wound up falling in love with Canada. That's me. That's home.
End of message.
Here goes. Well, you pronounced it right. It comes up a lot. Home is all about the people, good friends, good family. I've got both. But it never seemed enough to find my personal home, where I feel I really belong. Then out of the blue, about 5 years ago, I get this email from a distant relative. Honestly, I'm not even sure we're related. He came across me while Googling and was intrigued. On a lark, he invited me to his yearly all-men Grignon family reunion. Coincidentally, it was at a cottage not far from my house. On a lark, I accepted, largely because I was curious, but also I wanted to know how they felt about home and how it relates to family.
My kids come up a lot often to Kincardine. I'm there. They're there. There's one there every week in Kincardine. To me, that's home. Then when the kids are there. Yeah.
How about you? Like you mentioned being between Ottawa and Halebury, but how would you define it?
My
it where
home
you grew
is
up?
actually Halebury, where my roots are.
That's the house.
No, not the
Yeah,
house.
for you.
No, it doesn't matter. I mean,
Yeah. For you, I guess.
hey, to me, Halebury is home.
How come?
That's where I was raised, because that's where my roots were. That's where my family is. I'm so bonded to Halebury that I'm even present at the cemetery. I don't think it's a town. I think it's just your roots.
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing like being home. I agree with my dad. Home is where my family is and my friends are. And if they all happen to come with us to a place like this, then, you know, for this weekend, this is home.
This is your home?
For this weekend, yeah, this is home.
I've discussed this with other people, is when I move into my new house, I won't consider it my home. I'll consider it my home every second week. Every second week.
When the kids come.
My home. The week that I don't have my kids, it'll be a place to stay until they get there.
Right.
And that's simple as that. But when we talk about roots, then I'm another Northern Ontario boy. And I am extremely proud of my heritage in Northern Ontario. And whenever I meet people, they ask me, well, where are you from?
You gotta say French Canadian.
French Canadian, for sure. Oui, le franco-ontarien. Puis quand je parle des gens, les gens me demandent d'où tu viens.
Tu viens du Nord.
Je dis non.
That's interesting, because you said, when you were in Vienna, and someone said where you're from, and you said, I'm from Ottawa.
They asked me where I lived. I lived in Ottawa.
I think I do it too.
When people say, people ask me where I live. Yeah. How often have I said?
When they say where you're from, you say, I'm from Hillsbury, but I live in Ottawa?
Depends how good looking she is.
And where she's from.
But I think you're right. When people ask me actually where I'm from, I'm thinking of when I was raised, and I say Hillsbury too.
Exactly. To me, it's an
from, but from is
extremely proud.
There's a difference between where you're from
I'm a Northern
and where you are,
boy.
where you live. Yeah.
Where you live.
And that whole culture thing. I mean, I've learned how to work hard. I've learned everything, my values, everything. It's Northern Ontario values.
So is that the values in the North? Is that what defines home?
That's if you want to call it home, sure. When I define myself,
right?
I define myself firstly comme franco-ontarien
What?
du Nord, not a franco-ontarien du Sud. That's different.
Right.
And not a Quebecer. I'm from Northern Ontario.
Big difference.
And there is.
Oh, yeah.
There is a big
Because
difference.
of everything.
I agree.
And it has to do with how my parents brought me up. It has to do with where I had to work, like in the mines, on a dairy farm.
What
and
political party
the
you
hard,
vote for?
Well, all of that. It's and it brought a work ethic for me that when I teach and I see what the kids are like nowadays, and I'm thinking they're missing that. They don't have any roots. They don't have
a sense of home?
I don't know if they do.
Cheers to the newfound Grignon! Newfound Grignon!
Next message. My name is Judy, and I traveled all over Canada and the U.S. for my job. I probably lived in about 7 or 8 different cities, and I would say Toronto is my home. Toronto being my home because it's the city where I bought my first house. It was a good house to me. I always felt like it had good vibes. And it's only because of that first house I was able to purchase the second house. And I remember closing the door on my first house when I looked back, and there wasn't any furniture. It was empty, no drapes, nothing. And I was just staring at the house, and I said, you know what? And I said it out loud. I said, you were a great house to me. Thank you so much. So that's home to me.
You're listening to Home, a special holiday program on CBC Radio One and Sirius XM 169. My name is Denis Grignon. Most of the people we've heard from so far about what home means to them are, older, compared to a teenager anyway. But our teens, like Richard Grignon suggested, maybe not that tuned into home and what it means.
Like, I got a home at Cuba where my grandmother and grandfather live, and also my uncle. I got homes in Newfoundland where I have different relatives who live. I mean, they treat me like...
I met Evan at his high school in Dartmouth.
Some of my friends' houses, they treat me like I'm their brother or sister or children because I've been there a long time. I've experienced good and bad with them, and it feels like home because I feel like I could do just what I want in there, like in my own house. Yeah. And that was home to me.
At what point did you realize that, hey, home is not just my house? I've got like 6 or 7 different homes in different continents. When was that dawning?
Well, because when I used to be here, in my Dartmouth home, people used to always be like, well, Evan, when are you coming back home? it would, like, people in Newfoundland would say that, and I was like, oh, so people there consider that place home. Like, in my perspective, they think that's their home, like my home.
Is that part of knowing what your home is, when other people say
When
what
they-
your home is?
When they consider, like, obviously when they say that, that means they consider that, like, their home is my home. And
What was it like when you first went to Cuba?
as far as I can remember, I can always remember just it always being a home, because my grandmother would always come in hugging me, and my grandfather, and, like, my grandmother would spoon feed me when I was 12 years old. I'd be playing my video games, and she'd come in with a big bowl of beans and tomato. That was home to me. It was a memory. It was a childhood memory. It's confusing when people say home, because I'd be gotta be like, what home are you speaking about? That home, or that home? I mean, like, I got many homes. When Mom says home, I know which home. If my friend says home, I know which home. It depends what person says, Evan, you have to go home, then I'll go to that home. I used to not like Halifax. I used to only think, oh, Dartmouth is the best, because, I mean, that's where my home is, and this is, like, where I like to do my things. But then some people from Halifax started coming here and starting to show me some things for, like, breakdancing. And so then later I started realizing my home was advancing. My home wasn't just Dartmouth. My home was also part of Halifax.
Which is only across the
Yeah,
bridge,
I know.
really. So
But-
really, you felt that far apart from the
Yeah,
two.
well, because I didn't like the city. I used to hate the city. I didn't like big crowds of people. I didn't like that there were so many cars and so many buildings close together. Home is where you decide be home. Like, where do you feel more comfortable? Home is, I don't know if you can use this, but home is where you can sit on the toilet as long as you want. You can use that. That is home to me. Is you don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry how you look at home. You don't have to worry how you smell. Home is where you can be the stinkiest person alive and just chill wherever you like. You can just do whatever you want. You can laze around in your home.
And
That
can-
is home.
And that can be in Atlanta, Canada, or
Yeah.
or BC.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Martha Chavez, and I live in Toronto, and my home is Toronto, because that's where my partner and my cats live. I was born in Nicaragua, but I don't have many ties there. My family, my entire immediate family, my brothers and sisters and my parents are in Guatemala. My parents are buried there, so that's my second home.
You're listening to CBC Radio One and Sirius XM 169. This program is called Home. My name is Denis Grignon, and despite having a wonderful family and friends and a house, I've always struggled with truly having or finding a home. But I think I'm getting closer by meeting and talking with so many different people and how they define home. Hi, Drew Hayden.
Yes, I is.
Nice to meet you.
Entree, sir.
Thank you. Drew Hayden Taylor is an award-winning author, playwright, scriptwriter, filmmaker. He also very recently bought his mother's house, so is returning home.
Born and raised on the Curve Lake First Nations.
What's home, Drew, to you? If I asked you, what is your home?
Oh, I mean, there have been entire libraries written about what is home.
To you.
Home is where you hang your hat.
Yeah.
You can't go home again. I mean, there's so much literature about
Sure.
the topic. For me, home is where you feel comfortable and safe.
Emphasis on the safe there, I sensed.
Yes, I think so, because it's hard to feel safe in a place that isn't your home. And I have, in the last, I'd say 25 years, I've spent about 15 or 18 years of those in Toronto. And I used to say, I live in Toronto, but my home is here. And so growing up here, there was only one road in and one road out. And so it was actually, you look back on it, a very safe community. Because I remember talking with people I was visiting a family in Vancouver, and they were in this sort of weird gated community in Vancouver. And I remember they had a son. I remember thinking, oh, it must be so interesting, exciting to live in a place where you can, it's so exciting, so many different things to do. You can go for walking, whatever. And then, as a kid, it was Curve Lake was boring. And they said, well, yes, but you don't have to worry about what's going to happen to your kids once they walk outside that gate. When I first moved to Toronto, I found it so strange when on Halloween, when the kids would come up, I'd see their parents hovering on the sidewalk. And here, all the kids would go trick-or-treating by themselves.
So home is where you can trick-or-treat on your own without your parents looking over your shoulder.
Well, I wouldn't say that, because a lot of people consider Toronto home and they still go trick-or-treating.
But to you?
To me, yes.
What did the reserve mean to you when you were 18, 19, 20, when you were away from it?
I don't know, because that was a difficult question, because I was incredibly homesick. Because I was going to college. I didn't really know anybody. I didn't even have an apartment or place to live my first week in Toronto. I was staying at the Y. But, you know, I learned all these wonderful, wonderful survival tips of living in a city. The fact that, wow, what a concept. You can actually order pizza and they'll deliver it to your house. Those first years were just full of experience of soaking in the world, soaking in Toronto, and to a lesser extent the world through Toronto, and seeing all these interesting cultures, trying all these interesting foods. I mean,
did that help with the homesickness?
It did. It did. It took your mind off it, and you'd have stories to tell when you came home.
When you came home, so this was still home, even when you were 18, 19. Yeah. Did you always know that you were?
No, I mean, I went through that rebellious period where I'm so glad to be out of here. I'm so glad to go out and party with people my own age and hang out and all those things. So it was a weird sort of thing where moving there, I was so glad to be off the reserve, and like that was the conscious part of me. The subconscious part of me was homesick, but I would never admit it.
Just even when I drove in here, stuff just slowed down in every good possible way.
When I would move to Toronto, move back here, is I would I learned to walk faster. Really? In Toronto, I would walk faster, and then when I was here and I was walking somewhere in the village, and I'd be walking fast, and I'd go, "Why am I walking so fast? I don't have to walk fast." But one of the great stories I heard was a friend of mine who was walking with somebody who was from outside of Ontario, and they passed another native person on the street, and they nodded at each other and said, "Anin." Ani, which is hello in Ojibwe. But the other person was in Ojibwe, she was Cree, and after they walked by, she said to him, "Why did you call that guy honey?" Right? 3/4 to 4/5 of my plays, my novels, whatever, take place in a thinly veiled curved lake, a place called Otter Lake. Home is a physical space, but it's also an emotional, mental space. I can't give you a definition of it. It just is, and I tap into it when I write, regardless of where I am.
So you're literally going home to your home, the home you grew up in.
Yeah. And it actually felt uncomfortable coming in there during the day to write because it was too much home. I was uncomfortable moving into my mother's house as it was, because it was so much my mother's house. But I didn't want to rent it out. I didn't want to sell it. I didn't know what to do. So I was in some limbo region. So I ended up, after some consultation with Janine, we ended up deciding to renovate it. It's still my mother's house, but we put our fingerprints all over it. It's now renovated. It has us on it. We've added a new room. We've renovated the basement so that it's like home 2.0.
Renovating a house to put your stamp on it and make it a home. Yeah, like Drew Hayden Taylor, I've tried that too, with less success. You're listening to Home, a special holiday program on CBC Radio One and Sirius XM 169.
Mary's here every day volunteering. So
I volunteer Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays technically. And
This is the Lighthouse Community Center in Peterborough. Many, if not most, of the people who come here every day aren't just struggling to find a home, they need a place to live. One of them is Ian, a man about my age but with a lot more mileage. We sit down next to each other. He talks to me openly, honestly. His words are measured, but they're thoughtful. He has lots of time to think about the importance of home.
Home for me would be some place that I feel comfortable with my surroundings and with the people that I'm there with.
Do you have that now?
No, I don't. No, not anywhere near.
What's it like dealing with that?
This place gives me my sanity. Believe it or not, coming here and volunteering and feeling useful, being a part of something, doing... at the end of the day, I feel as though I've accomplished something.
Mm-hmm.
So
is that what home is? A place where you feel you can accomplish something, or?
Accomplishing something is on the road to feeling at home. At least what was normal to my life, working all day long. And now that I'm not working and don't have the home life surroundings, it gives me, like I say, a sense of normalcy, productiveness, in the right way this time, perhaps. As far as a physical dwelling, if you're talking about home as a physical dwelling, a cardboard box can be just as homey as a mansion. It's all in how you feel. The properties have never meant anything to me. It's how you feel about where you are. Once again, I was working hard, I was productive, I felt like I accomplished something. I went out and I earned money, I took it home to the family, I provided for their sense of security and their well-being. That felt like home. the building itself, well, that can change. And a lot faster than most people realize it can happen.
I know you spent some time incarcerated inside.
Yeah.
What did home mean for you at that point?
Pretty much retracted inside of myself. I'm an avid reader, so I could read 500, 600, 700 pages a day. That's how I dealt with blocking it out.
So it was important to block it out?
Oh, yeah.
How come?
Think of where you are. What normal person wouldn't want to block out where they are because of the transgressions that they've... When you're institutionalized, they're not your family.
And you talked about books. Was your connection there between the books and the amount you read and a sense of home, or was it just a way to escape that maybe? Or?
It was an escape for me to take my mind off of where I was or what I was doing, or not doing for that, regardless. Instead of sitting and constantly worrying about or overthinking, which is unproductive, it's just a waste of time in most senses. It gave me an escape. It made my mind concentrate on something else.
How important is it for you now to find that sense of home? And it sounds like you're working towards that now.
It's retaining sanity important. Home is a sense of peace within yourself. It's not a structure.
As we heard in the past hour, home can be found in books, smells, sounds. Home can be as tactile as land or the sea, or as ethereal as a state of mind. Home is comfort, safety, security, providing for others, belongingness. I admit all that should have been enough to satisfy my own need to define my sense of home, and it does. Sort of. Towards the end of this personal journey, my wife Nancy found what she believed was the perfect home for our family. An older house not far away that needed a lot of work. On a quiet road with 50 acres and a beat-up barn. It seemed like it might be, home. It was perfect, actually. But after such a long, fruitless search for a sense of home, I was scared. Then I remembered what Sherry O'Brien, who left her home in Canada to make another home in Northern Ireland, told me.
Wherever you find yourself drawn to emotionally, you should get up and go. Don't be afraid of it. Don't say, oh, well, but that's not really where I should be. That's not really where I'm from. What do I know about that place? What do I know? I knew nothing about this place. Just pick up and go.
So we did it. We sold the old place and we picked up and we moved. I'll probably die with a mortgage, and I know I'll be swinging a hammer for the rest of my life doing home renovations. But that's okay, because my name is Denis Grignon, and I have a home.